Okay, so what we're just going to do here is we're just going to continue a little bit on characteristics for effective industries. And those of you doing business would probably have an advantage here. So firstly, what makes them effective? What makes them profitable? Remember, every single industry works off the premise or the idea that they can actually make a profit from doing this while providing a service. So firstly, they have to be pretty much near their feedstock, and in order to get their feedstock they need to have a raw material also close by in order for them to get the actual feedstock from that raw material. The second consideration they need to consider is reaction rate. Okay, so what temperatures will it be carried out at and what pressure will it be carried out at. Remember, if my temperature is low, my rate of reaction is very slow. Okay, and if my pressure is very high, it creates huge safety risks. So we'd have looked at that when we looked at rates of reaction. Thirdly, then we'd be looking at product yield. So how much product do I actually get from the amount of raw material and feedstock that I use? Fourth, co-products. So is there any co-products, or another word for co-products you might see is byproducts? And the considerations you'd have to think of here is, do they need to be separated from the main product? And if so, how? And again, how much? The fifth part here is waste disposal and effluent control. So how do you get rid of any of the wastes that you are producing and any particularly gases that you might be also producing as a result of your processing? So you have to look at controlling your emissions and your disposing of wastes there. Quality control. Okay, so how pure is a substance? How pure does it have to be? And within that, you'd use instrumentation. So we've looked at instrumentation and the likes of your infrared spectrometry, atomic absorption spectrometry. So all of those would, or some of those would be used to determine the different quality of the product. Okay, then you obviously have your safety. Okay, so how do you monitor your hazards? And then how do you train the staff in order to cope with those hazards? Next, then you have costs, and costs are pretty much split into fixed and variable. And again, those of you who are doing business will be aware of this. Fixed costs are costs that have to be paid regardless of production. Okay, so for example, there you'd be looking at something like rent. Rent tends to be a flat fee. Okay, so you'd have to pay that every single month, no matter how much of a product you produce. Variable costs then are a little bit different, and they depend on what you actually use and the level of plant output. So an example of a variable cost would be your light or your heat bills. Okay, so again, not every single one. Your electricity as well would be there. Not every single month, even if you take in a household, would they be the same. Fixed cost can also obviously be labor. Okay, in that in general most would have a fairly flat fee for their employees. However, a variable cost with relation to the labor would be if you offer overtime. That again would depend on the amount of plant output. The next thing they have to consider is where the site is located. So you need to obviously have it nearer the raw material source. Not only that, you also need to have a place to market the product, so to distribute the product once it is being produced. And then obviously you need to have a workforce as well that are skilled in order to carry out whatever work your plant wants to produce. And then finally then would be, obviously you need to have whatever materials are needed in order to make the chemical plant. And again, they have to be readily accessible. And what we're going to look at is, and this will be in the next video, is the study of magnesium oxide in Drogheda. And it comes from a mineral called periclase, and that's where the actual name of the industrial site itself gets its name, Premier Periclase. So it's magnesium oxide. Magnesium is Mg and oxide is O, and it's joined together by an ionic bond. Okay, so has a very, very high melting and boiling point. So that's its characteristic, okay, very high melting point. And because it's that, it is often used as the bricks which are stacked against furnaces, okay. It would also be used in smelters, which are used in the steel industry in order to make steel. And the reason why is because in a furnace, obviously you have an awful lot of heat produced, but these magnesium oxide pellets, they don't melt because they're ionic bondedly together, so they have a very high melting point. So it's manufactured by Premier Periclase, okay, and the periclase actually comes from the mineral itself, and it is a continuous process. So in the next video we're going to look at this in more detail.